Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome again to another edition of Better Than Broadway. I am Coach Rob, and this is Justin. Don't confuse him with his cousin Jason. We're back. Episode 9?
Actually, my name is Chester.
Let's go.
My name is Chester.
Justin, how are you
Jason
today, buddy?
is fully shaved. Justin has a full beard. I'm the 7 o'clock shadow. So, Chester.
Just 7 o'clock shadow.
Yeah.
The man with the 7 o'clock shadow, not a 5 o'clock shadow. Ryan is on vacations, and you're back after a sabbatical away. Your cousin did a fabulous job. But yeah, we're back, dude. The world's greatest tag team, you and me. We're back. Good to see us.
Is that what it is? When you said world's greatest tag team, I like that. Yeah, and I also love the word sabbatical. That's so funny. I was going to say the same thing, so I love that you say it because it's not really, isn't it sabbatical like a year long or something like that? And it's for like
it could be
religious
any
purposes or something.
It could be any extended period of time where you're gone from somewhere to doing something.
It just sounds so much better than he's a lazy fuck. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's very British.
Yes. For those of you that do not remember, if you weren't with us last episode, I was actually on holiday. My daughter and I went to the mountains, and Justin had to work, so his wonderful cousin Jason tagged in for him, and he and Ryan put on a great show last week. Episode 8 was a great success. But we are moving forward, and it's been a really busy week in professional wrestling. Two of the things that need to be highlighted, I do believe, before we get started. 17 years ago today, we lost an icon of the sport of Eddie Guerrero, Latino Heat himself. A man whose footprints and fingerprints will be left on this industry forever. Justin, your thoughts on 2005?
So 2005, I was not watching wrestling. So when all of these horrible things happened with, Eddie, and then, 2 years later, something like that with Benoit, all these horrible things were happening. And I knew about these guys because I watched them, I saw these guys, when they were in the Nitro days, the Cruiserweights, sure. And then the Radicals, when, all that kind of stuff when they transitioned over. So I knew about them. So when I heard about them, it hit me, but I wasn't watching during that time. So I didn't see them, in their last performances and this and that. I was more along the lines of my brother being like, oh my God, Eddie Guerrero died. And I'm like, it was crazy to me. It's crazy that it's been 17 years. And like you were saying, Rob, it's been a busy week in wrestling, but this week over the years has been a busy week in wrestling because, as we'll talk about here in a second, there's some other stuff that happened this weekend in wrestling. But to give proper respect to Eddie Guerrero, I think it's his mark on the sport cannot be overstated. Everything from a
Agreed.
Frog splash to his character, his outlandish character, to really just the luchador style, or just the more kind of like video game style that we see today, was very much so pioneered by him and a handful of other guys,
Absolutely.
2 decades prior to now.
And I agree wholeheartedly. And it's interesting because you think about the legacy that he has left behind. This is a guy who was a champion in Mexico, who's known Rey Mysterio forever. And these guys kind of broke into WCW right around the same time when Lucha Libre Wrestling became a mainstay. Paul Heyman actually brought these guys to ECW, Rey Mysterio, Juventud Guerrero, Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, Chavo. A lot of these guys came to ECW first. WCW grabs a hold of these guys, and for about 4 years, they were a mainstay. On the show. WCW created a cruiserweight championship for guys like Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, Juventud Guerrero, Chavo Guerrero, a lot of these guys. So you take that rivalry, just Eddie and Rey, and then you bring it over to WWE when WWE buys WCW in 2000. Eddie had already been in WWE for 2 years with Benoit, Malenko, and Perry Saturn as the Radicals. So, you you really had a good 10 years of his legacy in American professional wrestling. And, what a legacy he's left behind. Like you said, the frog splash, the lying, the cheating, the stealing, the way that wrestlers develop their characters and all these great things. So to Eddie Guerrero, 17 years past, we love you. We miss you. Something you alluded to. Go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is that Eddie Guerrero, he's not a big man, but his presence was so big. The thing that always blew my mind, and I had to verify this. So he was billed at 5'8". He was only 5'6.5", Rob.
Right.
He's 5'6.5". He didn't feel like a small guy when he was in the ring. And I know that a lot of times the workers, if you're working with somebody taller, they'll kind of stay in this position to kind of not, give away those kind of things. You won't ever be kind of like toe to toe or whatever. But, Chris Benoit was only, I think, like 5'9". And when you see the pictures of them, like when they're not standing in the ring together, he's significantly taller than Eddie Guerrero. Right. So I think it sounds like a silly thing, but to me, for somebody that small, that size wise, obviously he was jacked out of his mind, especially in the WWF days. And that helped, he was about as wide as he was tall. But I just can't get over his ability to seem larger than life physically through his charisma, is just his personality being larger than life. So I kind of want to add that in because it's crazy to think 5'6.5", and this is according to Meltzer. Yeah. This is not the build height. I think he was billed at 5'8". So, but yeah, you were talking about another not so big guy that was groundbreaking, going against a guy that was a little bit taller than him. This year, it's the 25th anniversary of the Montreal Screwjob.
Absolutely.
And that was something that at the time I was watching. I didn't watch that pay-per-view live, but I heard about it. And I don't know about you. Give me your opinion on this. I don't know if you saw it live or whatever, but they didn't have the dirt sheets online and stuff like they do now. You can't go watch YouTube videos or a podcast after the fact to see like what's going on. Like we didn't really know what was going on. When you're young like that, especially this was like 97.
97.
So, I was 14. Yeah, I was 14, 15 years old. So I was young enough to just kind of assume that everything was a work, right? I mean, I knew that it was predetermined, so I wasn't that type of mark necessarily anymore, but I assumed the opposite. I was like, well, they're all buddies. They're all friends backstage, even though they have feuds. They all go to dinner after together and they stay in the same, they rent a big house and everything's hunky-dory. I wasn't aware of the actual real life beef that transcends, or not transcends, but, can sometimes spill into the ring. And then I had no idea, it's crazy to me. Did you realize and recognize what was happening about Brett going into, WCW when he did that? And he had the brains to do it, backwards so you can see it because, it's in reverse when you do it on the camera. Sure. What were your thoughts when you're actually watching that or hearing that? Because we're about the same age.
So I remember watching it live, Survivor Series 97. And they had been talking on TV. There were these rumblings that Brett was leaving, and Sean, was doing his thing. And you think about pro wrestling as a whole, and like you said, you think that these guys are friends in real life. They get along because in 1994, I'm 1997. I'm 14 years old. Obviously, I know what's real and what's for sale. And I know what work is. I know what shoot is. And you know things, insider things about the industry. And everybody did get along. And everybody got along in the back except for Sean and Brett's camps. Sean's camps, you had the Triple H's, the X-Pacs, the Scott Halls, all those guys who had already left for WCW, the Clique. And then Bret Hart had his group of, his brother and Bulldog and Neidhart and all these guys. So Brett had his camp and Sean had his camp. And that was kind of the way things were. They really didn't like each other. And in interviews, Sean said that he was hard to work with and he was a hothead and he was doing drugs and he was in a bad place in his life before he found the Lord. And so, he just didn't want to deal with it. Brett did not want a job to Shawn at the Survivor Series because he just felt like he was leaving anyway. He would win his last match, and then he would dump the title to Vince the next night on Raw. And that was the plan going forward. And they finally agreed that was what they were going to do. And then Vince, has a quiet meeting and says, yeah, we're not going to do that shit. We're totally going to screw him over. And so everybody claims, everybody that was in on it, there was a small group of people in on it. You had Earl Hebner, you had Vince, and you had Shawn, and maybe 2 other people. And everybody claims they didn't know what was going on. Yeah, they claim they didn't know what was going on. Everything was just kind of whatever. And then Shawn puts Brett in the sharpshooter, and of course Brett's going to put him in the sharpshooter, and that was going to be the end of the match. But Hebner rings the bell. Brett's grabbing at Shawn's ankle, like, wait a minute, what the hell just happened? And then next thing you know, Brett's saying, WCW. He's spitting on Vince. He's breaking cameras, just throwing shit around. And, I can understand his frustration because he was lied to by his boss. And I get that frustration, and I understand why Brett would have potentially acted out, or he actually did act out. And then they go to make the Wrestling with Shadows documentary. Have you seen that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, which it's so ironic that was happening and going on around then. There just so happened to be cameras. And that's what I want to talk about because and I know we don't want to make this, we got a lot of new stuff to talk about, but this is a huge piece. This is the 25th anniversary, and this is a big piece because you can argue story. That this story, which wasn't in canon with the storylines that were in place, is what created the most famous heel of all time, arguably, the Mr. McMahon character. This is really where it birthed, right? So if this didn't happen, would we have a Stone Cold? Would we have this character that bought him? Would Vince have had that foresight to be like, you know what, I'm going to be the asshole. I'm going to play the evil guy since people think I'm the evil guy. I don't know. Maybe not. But to me, looking back on it, Rob, looking back on it, it's so perfect. It's almost hard to believe that it wasn't a work. Right. It's like, how can you do that so perfectly to make it feel like it's chaos? And then Brett happened to just already be in talks with WCW. And then this was, and he was going there, but it felt so crazy to me in the time that I wasn't sure then. And now, yes, it was a shoot, but what's different to me is that you touched on it. You said that there were so many people that were, there wasn't as many people, but Shawn Michaels and Brett legitimately did not like each other in the back, and they had heat. Right. But they were professional enough to do these things and work together, and there wasn't some huge fallout in a press conference after the fact, even though this was the biggest deal in wrestling. So what is it about the professionalism of the guys in the old days and now? And I know we're not going to talk about the brawl out at All Out. We agreed on that. We're done talking about Mr. UFC fighter for the time being. But just in general, it seems like people are not quite as protective of the business, I guess, or I don't know. Is it just an old school thing, or
I think you said it. They're just not as protective of the business anymore because you have the dirt sheets and you have sports writers and all these things, and the curtain really got lifted on pro wrestling when the Clique united at Madison Square Garden in the ring. Right before Nash and Hall left for WCW, and they had the big hug in the ring, and you had the Montreal Screwjob. So based on those two events in WWF, WWE history, you hang a lot of what's going on with wrestling today because, again, they lifted the veil. They broke the fourth wall. People understood that, hey, not everything is as cool as it seems. Vince McMahon is a goddamn genius for creating this Mr. McMahon character out of the Montreal Screwjob. Now, I say that to say this. With the Wrestling with Shadows documentary that was made, and all these other things that kind of add up with Sean and Brett, with Mr. McMahon, with the Montreal Screwjob, with the Wrestling with Shadows, with all of these things, it makes you want to sit back and say, was all of this one giant
conspiracy
that we all just kind of fell for to create this new era in sport? Now, obviously, there's no goddamn way. But, there's so many things that just line up that make you scratch your head and say, how the hell were they able to fit all of these pieces into this puzzle perfectly to make pro wrestling what it was today? Because the Attitude Era started very shortly after the Montreal Screwjob, because the Attitude Era really was like 1998 to like 2002 or 2003. And then
people argue about it. Yeah. A lot of people say it was when was Bret Hart versus Stone Cold, though. A lot of people say it started then. A lot of people say it started at King of the Ring. It's that's a lot of people say it started with a feud with Vince McMahon and Austin. I think that's different. But something that just kind of hit me, and I want to throw this at you and see what you think, because we're talking about like what is the difference between the guys back then and the guys now, and protecting the business and this and that. And you touched on the click, and you touched on the the, what do they call it, when they pull back the curtain, that's the thing, they have a name for it when they all hug. Curtain call. There you go. Sorry, I'm brain fart.
They were in the cage. They had a cage match.
They all came out after.
They all came out after, and they had
Triple H, Shawn Michaels,
Hall and Nash. Before
them. So I think the difference back then and now is that almost all the wrestlers lived their gimmicks, or at least closer to their gimmicks, right? In the limelight, kayfabe was very, very prevalent. And because of that, it forced these guys to act as though they were their characters more often than not. And because of that, as you know, and anybody else knows, the more you do something, the more it becomes natural. And I think much more of these guys kind of moved into this natural progression of them becoming their character that they're portraying, and it not really being so much of a gimmick anymore, and it just kind of being a part of them. As Stone Cold Steve Austin would say, them just turned up to 11. And I think that has a lot to do with it, because it changes the realism. Now, you can go back in time and you can create a conspiracy theory out of anything. And like you're saying, something like this lends itself very well to that, because, I mean, this seems like, it's too perfect because it created this thing that's amazing. But I think that's probably more of the cause and effect of that, I think, is more Vince McMahon and the people being in it, being so into their gimmick and just being so good at shooting from the hip and making chicken salad out of chicken shit. I think that's what it comes. But it only comes if you really, truly live that gimmick. And so few people nowadays live the gimmick. And is it good? Is it not good? I don't know. I'm sure there's probably a lot of negatives to living like a psychopath or something like that on a regular basis. But you see it every now and then. And when you do see people that truly live their gimmick, it's special. And that's who I want to talk about next, because the first person that comes to mind when I think about somebody that completely just indulges himself into the gimmick is MJF.
Love it. And it's so interesting to me. And it lends so much perspective to how special pro wrestling is, because actors go and do, method acting to try to get into the character mindset. Evan Peters, when he did Dahmer, was wild. And he was great. And Daniel Day-Lewis, when he did Lincoln, was magnificent, to the point where he only answered to Mr. President for like the 6 months they were filming. Didn't matter if he was on set or off set. He stayed in character for 6 months. And that's freaking wild if you think about it. But again, the creative genius of pro wrestling, the creative genius of somebody like a Vince McMahon, somebody like a Bret Hart, a Shawn Michaels, an MJF, if you will. And the interview that MJF did, the shoot promo interview that he did on Dynamite this week, really, in my opinion, it's like how does this guy just keep elevating himself every week? It's like every week he just gets better and better and better. It's like watching The Rock in the early days of the Attitude Era, when he was in the Nation of Domination, go from Rocky Maivia to The Rock, and he just keeps building and building and building and building and building until he became the biggest star in the industry. And MJF is on that path. That interview was studly character work. And please, Justin, just run with it, because I know you're chomping at the bit to run with this thing. So please.
Well, no. Actually, what I want to talk about before we get into that, because you were talking about these actors method acting, and we were talking about the ups and downs, the pros and cons of doing this, and you were mentioning something. The first thing that came to my mind was Heath Ledger in Batman, or the Dark Knight, and look what ended up happening to him. Amazing performance. Arguably, I mean, it's some people say that he's not a real Joker, but most people, no one's going to deny that it was an amazing performance. And he got so into his character that he stayed in his hotel for weeks at a time and didn't speak to anybody with just his cats, and then he ended up dying over it. You know, is that the only reason? No, but I mean, a lot of people saw and said he went into depression because of what he was doing for that role, and he ultimately paid the price for it. And I think that's a beautiful kind of analogy to maybe the downsides to doing that. You know, there are plenty of other people. You think of Abdullah the Butcher, or like some of these other guys, the original Sheik, that lived this gimmick, and like, it's just, they're demented people when you think about them, but they gave their life to the sport, to the craft, to the art. And I think MJF is definitely, I know MJF is definitely doing that. He doesn't care if we like him or not. He is literally doing everything he can. And I would even argue to say that he is doing it more so, I'm not going to say better than The Rock did it, but he has so much more. The Rock had Monday nights, right? That's all he had. He had a couple minutes on the microphone to show his improvement. You know, MJF has unlimited content that he can create for this. So he has chances to promos. Yes, layer. And I think because of that, it's more entertaining than if I look back and think about The Rock's even. I'm not saying that it's going to be as groundbreaking as The Rock, but I'm just saying his talent and his ability to dive into this character and just create something new that's exciting, that gets you to and look, like we might as well call this like the MJF fanboy podcast, because we all love MJF, but it's important to talk about the promos. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. I don't care, because he's good right now. He really is, in my opinion. Him and Sami Zayn is the best thing going for wrestling.
I agree. You know, when I know we sit here and talk about him so much, and we really talk about Sammy a lot too. My God, Sami Zayn, when he gets these guys to break character during the promos, it makes the show that much more enjoyable for somebody like me who's been watching this all his life. And you know, I've seen hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of characters in my day, and wrestling gets stale. Whether you agree with me or not, wrestling gets stale. I mean, it's the reason that people, you know, quit watching, because it gets stale. Yeah.
Well, even us, we're lovers of it. But like, you can still, I'll go through pins where it's like this week, like every now and then life gets in the way. It's like, hey, before we do the podcast, I need to run through Smackdown and Rampage because I didn't get a chance to watch it. You know, life gets in the way.
Right. Yeah. And not having Sami Zayn on Smackdown this week, luckily the matches were good and the content was good, and we'll get to Smackdown in here in just a moment. But it's just like having Sami Zayn on your television makes the show better. It helps it flow. It helps it move. It has taken the Usos to a new level. It's helping Solo Sikoa. It's helping Roman become a better champion. I mean, everything about just inserting somebody like him, who was an afterthought for the longest time, who just an afterthought. I mean, they put an Intercontinental title on him. Then Jeff Hardy took it off, and after that, it was just, you know, forget about Sami Zayn. Who the hell cares? And this guy is enjoying a tremendous renaissance in his career, and I love it.
You know what it is with the bloodline is that it was just the right spice. You know, you ever make something, you're like, like this is okay, and then you can just change one thing, like, I don't know, add fucking bacon to it. Sami Zayn is the bacon to the bloodline, because the bloodline was so serious. Every single character was so serious, and you can't always be serious all the time in sports entertainment. It works, but you need some kind of balance. But Roman doesn't need to be a jokester. The Usos don't need to be a jokester. You definitely don't want Sikoa being a jokester. You need someone that can, when there's seriousness, somebody just makes that one that farts in the room and breaks the tension. And that's Sami Zayn. Sami Zayn is the fart. Sami Zayn is the bacon. But we were talking about promos. Yeah, absolutely. We were talking about promos. There's another promo I want to talk about, and I know that you've seen them, and I'm itching to talk about it because they always do such a good job, and they've been gone for a little bit. But this is the House of Black and Malachi Black, and tell me what you think about that, because I've been pondering and I've been doing a little bit of discovery into these things, and I've got kind of like an opinion on it. But what's your opinion on what all this means? With this, the kind of it felt like a work shoot for a little bit with Malachi leaving. He's obviously back. So what do you think?
So I'm going to throw up an analogy and then I'm going to explain. Bray Wyatt is to WWE what Malachi and the House of Black are to AEW. And I'll explain. Because when you take somebody who is so incredibly cerebrally intelligent, just really on a brilliant level, a Mensa level IQ, and you add in a little bit of spice of creativity, when you add the bacon, if you will, you've got something special. You've got something special with Malachi Black and the House of Black, because now you have four people who, in a lot of ways, were background noise, and now they're in the forefront, because Julia Hart with the Varsity Blondes, she was a cheerleader. Buddy Matthews, when he was in WWE, he was a lackey with Seth Rollins. When you look at Brody King, he was a lackey in Ring of Honor. He was just hanging out in the background. And now with Malachi Black, these four, they're all kind of equals in the sense where everybody has their moment. You have a monster, you have a technician, you have a leader, and then you have a woman wrestler. And I know people are comparing Judgment Day and House of Black, but House of Black takes it to a completely different level because it's AEW. They let these guys do a lot more with their gimmicks, and they don't have to get everything approved. It's just, hey, you want to go do something? Here's a pile of money. Go do it. And this whole resurrection thing where Julia buried him, and then they dug him back up and they dusted him off and they made it work. I mean, it's such a peculiar thing to see the resurrection of the House of Black. And I really hope that now they've had a couple of weeks off to get their minds right and kind of take care of themselves and take care of their families, that we're going to see a very dominant House of Black. And I hope they go get those trios titles off the kick.
I think the trios titles has the potential to be the hottest thing for the next, foreseeable future in AEW. The House of Black, to me, and Malachi Black in general, the reason why I love it so much is exactly what you said, is they've just given them the time, the money, and said, do what you want. The reason why Judgment Day is completely different from the House of Black, and I'm not going to say that it's a bastardized version of it. I'm not going to say that it's not as good, but the difference and the reason why I like it is because I never really liked something that felt mainstream. I loved UFC in the mid 90s. And then as soon as Tap Out and Affliction started becoming a thing and everybody and their grandmother started watching these things, I didn't like it as much because I like things that feel like they're mine. Right. Wrestling in general is kind of subculture, right? We know it's a huge thing, but it's still kind of subculture. You can still walk up to, 19 out of 20 people are going to know who John Cena is. But if you ask them about wrestling, they're like, yeah, most of the people will be like, oh yeah, with that fake stuff, whatever, so it's subculture, but within that, there's still mainstream and not mainstream. And to me, the difference between a Judgment Day and a Malachi Black is Judgment Day is Slipknot, right? Judgment Day is Metallica. I like Slipknot. I like Metallica, but Malachi Black, the House of Black, they're fucking Napalm Death. They're Cradle of Filth. or even more, they're Black Flag. They're punk. They're punk rock is what they are.
Yeah.
They're underground. They're not trying to appeal to the 7-year-old that thinks like, ooh, this is creepy. They're actually trying to be fucking creepy. And they're trying to, I don't even want to say an older audience, but they're trying to say like, hey, this can be art. This can be different. It doesn't have to be in simple colors of red, blue, green, and yellow. Like there's this whole spectrum of colors that we can paint with. And it doesn't just have to be Disney production, like the haunted house at Disney. Like that's the difference. Like what WWE is portraying with the Judgment Day is the haunted house at Disney. I fucking love Disney. I love the haunted house. But what Malachi Black and the House of Black is, this is like some like Last House on the Left, John Carpenter, like 1970s, like Chainsaw Massacre kind of shit. And it's just something different. And to me, I love it. I'm excited about it. Have you seen all the promos, Robin? Have you seen? Okay, you haven't? Have you seen like the different ones? Because they've all released.
I'm with you. I've seen this stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So what do you think about this element of, they seem to have different elements, like Malachi Black is seeming to portray fire. Blake, I'm sorry, what is it? Murphy, whatever. I get the names messed up when they're WWE. Yeah.
Buddy Matthews.
He's water.
Buddy Matthews.
Yeah. Buddy Matthews. There you go. And he seems to be water. Brody seems to be, ash or earth of some kind. And for whatever reason, Julia seems to be almost like, the mancer, like the necromancer of kind. And that's what I'm looking at. It looks like they're all burning, drowning, coming from the ashes. And Julia seems to be the necromancer of sorts that's bringing them up from the dead. And that's what I'm looking at. And they all say the same thing. They're talking about an elegy of the forgotten. That's what that's what they're all saying. And an elegy is typically some type of poem. It's typically a religious poem, mourning someone that's dead.
Correct.
Right. So they're talking about these guys coming up and rising from the dead. We just recently saw them. And I think that maybe giving it a little bit more time would have been better, but I think AEW needs this right now. So I see what's going on with it. But, what do you think about that? And have you read anything into, I guess just kind of the metaphors that they're using with this? Because I feel like you were saying, he's so smart. He's so intelligent. Him and Bray are right here with it. Every single thing that he does is so layered.
Go ahead.
No, I was saying, do you think
I missed that last part.
Okay, yeah, I think we're breaking up. We've had some technical difficulties, but I was asking what you think about, have you read into this and the kind of metaphors that they're using into this, because it's very intriguing and it's so detailed. I think there's a lot that can be read into it. What's your opinion on the actual what they're going to do?
I actually haven't done a lot of digging into this thing just because there's so much going on in wrestling right now that we have to get into. I am intrigued. I think this is a truly telling story. I think this is going to be really great TV once they get it going. I would like to see these guys doing some of those cinematic matches that we had during the pandemic with WWE. I think that would give, because then you could kind of tap into the supernatural, because if with the Undertaker, you had the lightning and the fire and shit like that, but you have to set that up. It has to be put in certain places. Even with Bray Wyatt, the lights would have to go out for him to disappear into other places. But if you really take it slow and you think meticulously about your scenes and you make this a little more cinematic just for a little while, you can give these guys the intrigue and the mystery that they want. Now, as far as digging into the promos themselves and what they're doing, I'm a little bit ignorant on that. I'll be the first one to admit that. I feel like you probably have much more insight on that than I do, because I know this is something that truly interests you a little bit more than it interests me.
I just I love the idea of bringing paganism into it because it's something fresh and it's something new and it's something old. Paganism is one of the oldest religions, you know what I mean? Like, and it's something that's underground. So why not make it? I think the reason why it hasn't been brought to the light in the past is because it wasn't super mainstream. And that's not something that, a McMahon would go to. It's like, well, who's going to get this? The old, like, I don't get it. You know what I mean? And Tony Khan isn't that type of person. He's like, yeah, it's different. It's cool. Fuck, this is great. Let's just try it and see what happens. So I like that. And I think also because we're seeing more like pagan in media and we're seeing, you've got the Vikings and like all this other kind of stuff that's going on, all the different TV shows and stuff like that. So I think that's part of it as well. But I love anything Malachi Black does. I'm so happy that he's back on television. I really hope that he took the time that he needs to get healthy mentally because I know he's going through a lot of stuff and he's a very private person. So it doesn't matter what he's going through because we're all going through something and we have to appreciate that. And we, at the end of the day, we want everybody to be happy and healthy and safe. But we were talking about paganisms and Vikings and all this other kind of stuff. There's some other controversy that's going on with this whole Viking gimmick. Can you touch on that?
Yes. So on Friday night on Smackdown, we saw the return of the Viking Raiders, and they didn't come alone. So for weeks now, we've been having these promos with a woman talking about, things that are getting ready to happen. Valhalla is coming and this and this and this. And then the Viking Raiders show up in the middle of a segment with Hit Row and Legado del Fantasma. Zelina Vega and B-Fab have been, like this for weeks. And they were going to set up a match. And they're in the ring. They're getting ready to go. And then the horns. Boom, here come the horns. And then you've got this woman standing with her back to the Titan to the entrance, looking at the Titantron, carrying a staff, flames everywhere, badass. And then out of nowhere, here come Eric and Ivar, looking dangerous, got their war paint on, got their gear on, and they're just beating the hell out of people. And then
looks like
Sarah
Kratos.
Logan,
he looks like
like dope as hell. And then here comes out of nowhere, Sarah Logan pops in and starts beating up the women. And Michael Cole's like, what's going on? What's going on? He's like, oh my God, it's Sarah Logan. It's Sarah Logan. Back from the Riot Squad back in the day. Well, Sarah Logan married Raymond Rowe, who was Eric in the Viking Raiders. He and Ivar, who used to be Hanson, they were the Ring of Honor tag champions, IWGP tag champions, NXT, WWE Raw champions. They've been tag champions all over the world. And they're badasses, and they deserve their flowers because they're a great tag team, and they're solid dudes too. Ray and Hanson are great dudes. But anyway, going back to this, they go in, they clear house and everything, and then they're standing up in the ring. Well, it was one thing to have them back in WWE. This is great, super happy. The internet, on the other hand, obviously the internet's like, I've seen
had a different idea.
Before. And so, Sarah Logan's got on, she's got the dreadlocks and she's got the face paint on. She's got black face paint on across her nose, and then she's got a black line through her chin here, and she's got one contact lens that's a different color than her own. And the internet loses their minds, and they said, hey, wait a minute, she looks too much like Max the Impaler. And Max the Impaler Go. So for those of you that don't know who Max the Impaler is, they, Max the Impaler is a trans-masculine, non-binary pro wrestler, and they are a member of a group called the Wasteland War Party, and there's 3 of them, and they're all they're a group of wrestlers, and they've been in Ring of Honor. They have been in NWA. Currently, they are in NWA. And Max actually had a match at Hard Times 3 Saturday night. But they all ran to the internet. The most vocal has been Heidi Howitzer, who is kind of the unofficial leader of the group, Wasteland War Party, saying that, they stole the gimmick. They did this. They did that. They stole from us. And everybody's really upset. It's like even down to the green dreadlock that Sarah has. It's like, she totally stole Max's gimmick, and it's just everybody's up in arms about it. Viking culture is very much in the avant-garde right now in the mainstream, the subculture.
God of War Ragnarok just got released too. Looking forward to playing that.
Released. That Vikings television series was super popular a couple of years ago. Even Adam Copeland Edge was a regular on that show. They have another Viking.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, dude, he was really good. He was really good. Check it out.
I need to go back and watch it. I need to go back and watch it.
I can't remember what the character's name was. I don't think it was Ragnar, but it was something like he was a big deal character in that series for a good little while. Yeah, super good. And so anyway, everybody has kind of given their opinion on it, and there's a lot of things that happen in pro wrestling, a lot of gimmicks bleed over into other things. I mean, obviously with the leather and the face paint and the green dreadlock and all this other stuff, who's to say what happened? Obviously Sarah Rowe and her husband, Eric, from the Viking Raiders, they do these Viking reenactments. Their wedding was Viking themed. They do a lot of this kind of stuff. It's just what they're into. And, who knows if she blatantly, went on to the gimmick or not. I don't really know. It's just one of those things, man.
The thing is that there's only so much stuff under the sun that you can go in, and Vikings are really hot right now. And you see that with wrestling. Wrestling always mimics whatever's going on in the world, right? Like that's why Sergeant Slaughter teamed up with the freaking Iron Sheik. What's going on with that area? That's why we have America versus Russia, all this other kind of stuff over the past. Sure. Rusev and Cena back in those days. It's always going to mimic whatever's going on. Now, I will say back in the day, I feel like wrestling was a little bit further behind the curve of the current events. And I feel like, and I don't know if it's just because of social media and the internet, or maybe just the viewers a little bit younger now, or not the viewer, but actually the people that are in it are a little bit more up on speed and younger. The millennial, we're getting millennial wrestlers and things like that. I think that might have something to do with it. But at the end of the day, it's still just going to mimic whatever's going on. So if Vikings are freaking hot, you're going to see a lot of Vikings going on right now. You know what I mean? If Cowboys are freaking hot for whatever reason, you're going to see a lot of Cowboys. Just in the 80s and 90s, it was all cowboy this, cowboy that, or whatever. Cowboys aren't super sexy right now. So all you got's, Hangman, which is, love them. But, you're right. There's a lot of stuff that we need to go into. I think the controversy with that is it's interesting. I don't know. I don't personally think they're ripping them off. I think it's more of probably a thing where they they're here, they're getting a little bit of piece of here, they're getting a little bit of piece of there, and they're putting it together. Yeah. And they're just trying to make something their own, which is really all anybody's doing, right? But the whole eye one contact thing, Malachi Black did that best.
Well, Kane did it too. But moving on. Everybody.
Yeah. Again, Kane Slipknot. Kane is Slipknot.
Yeah, everybody just takes a little bit of things. I mean, obviously, this is in the primordial stages of what's going on because this just happened on Friday. So who knows exactly where this is going to lead. It may lead to, honestly, there's no such thing as bad press, and this attention may lead to the Viking Raiders getting a big push because, maybe Triple H just is going to needle the indie wrestling fans and be like, look, we got a good thing going here. We're gonna see what we're gonna do. Who knows? But
I agree.
Speaking of tag team wrestling, Speaking of tag team wrestling, we had a great match to kick off SmackDown the other night between the Usos and the New Day, and this is the rivalry. This is John Cena and Randy Orton. This is Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar. This is Ray and Eddie Guerrero. This is, I'll go as far as say Stephanie McMahon and Brie Bella. This is a real rivalry that has been going on for years and years now. These two have been fighting over the tag titles for at least 8 years. They had one of the most impassioned promos of the last 6 months for tag team wrestling, talking about how the New Day took this, preacher gimmick, and they were supposed to be heels, and they got it over. And the Usos, were this, they were doing the haka dances with the face paint on, and they were twins, and they got it over. And now you're looking at these guys now, and the New Day up until Friday had the longest reign as tag team champions in WWE history. And with this win on SmackDown,
well, they still do technically. They still do technically tomorrow on Monday. When most people are going to be watching this, it will officially be longer than the New Days. Which, I mean, it's going to happen because they're not going to have another match. But yeah, technically, man, Rob, does this feel? It was a great match, and it's a real rivalry, and I just feel it. Does it feel like they just didn't give it enough time to simmer talking about this? I feel like it kind of came out of nowhere, and they did a great job with it. But as far as like butting the heads, I feel like the Usos were feuding with these guys and these guys and these guys, and it felt like just New Day came out of nowhere, like, oh hey guys, you're getting close to our thing, so we should probably, like, yeah. I was very happy with the promo, amazing promo. I was ecstatic with the match, amazing match. They gave it a lot of time. They gave it like a half an hour.
I know
it was like 3 commercial breaks or something like that.
4 segments. 4 segments.
Yeah. But what do you think? I mean, do you think? I feel like this is such a big field match. This should have been a pay-per-view event, or I'm sorry, a premium live event match. Yeah, I feel like.
But here's where it gets dicey, because there's several reasons that it had to be on Fox, and the number one reason is the timetable. If you wait till Survivor Series to have this match, you're denying the people the Survivor Series style match with the Bloodline versus what I'm guessing is going to be the Brawling Brutes and Drew McIntyre, based on how things went on Friday. And then you got to look at ratings. Fox wants ratings. Football is crazy right now. The World Series just ended. They need a big ratings boost. Triple H is now running WWE. Vince is gone. They need ratings. Triple H is trying to prove himself. So you add all these things together, and then, like you said, the New Day's like, whoa, you're getting near our thing. Like, we need to get on this. And so I feel like they had to strike while the iron was starting to simmer, because they've been talking for weeks about the Usos getting closer, and with Roman having the title for 800 days, it all is just kind of blending together. But to make it more about, giving this story a little bit longer to simmer, I agree wholeheartedly. If we could have waited till Survivor Series, it'd have been great. Obviously, you ran out of time. I mean, if it had been one of those points where, they're going to break the record, the day after the Survivor Series, then yeah, it's perfect. But with wrestling, like you said, there's a lot of perfect storms, like the Montreal Screwjob and Mr. McMahon's villain character and all these other things. Full circle. And
do you think? Let me interrupt you. Do you think that they did this because? Do you think that maybe that was the plan? But Big E wasn't ready to come back yet, because I feel like that would have been a piece that we could have seen at Survivor Series had Big E been back.
I'm not entirely sure. We don't know if E is ever going to wrestle again. Yeah. I mean, we just don't know. And Ettore Ewan, if you're watching this ever, Big E, if you're ever seeing this show, man, we wish you the best, dude. You are one of our favorites, and
I feel like he's going to be back.
God,
I feel like he'll be back.
And even if he just comes back in a managerial role, just to have him on TV, his energy, and just
I agree. Absolutely. I don't think he's going to want that, though.
Of course
I think
not.
That would be like going window shopping for him. I don't. So
well, it's like me with my shoulder. I'm an Olympic weightlifter. I've been doing it for almost 25 years of my life. And for you to tell me that I can't do it anymore because my shoulder is so bad, screw that. I'm going to find a way to get this thing right, because it's what I love to do. It's the same thing with your back. It's the same thing, with your knee. I mean, it's
neck.
The neck. Yeah, your neck. I mean, so you understand. I understand. We're athletes. We're competitors. And we sit here and we pontificate and proselytize about pro wrestling, but at the end of the day, we love this because it reminds us of.
You're so sexy when you use big words like that. I love it when you use big words. You said, did you say prostitute? I don't prostitute. All right. I want to go on the record and say I do not do that anymore.
I said proselytize, but moving on.
Hey, we're talking about factions and we're talking about the Bloodline and the New Day. And I mean, the Bloodline is obviously, arguably one of the greatest factions, it's definitely one of the greatest ones that's going out right now in the longest time. But since we were talking about dark gimmicks earlier and we're talking about factions, like we have to talk about Bray Wyatt because of a couple things. First of all, he headbutted the shit out of LA Knight, right, on SmackDown. But second of all, there's rumors that are going around that he wants Eric Rowan and Bo Dallas, his brother, back. I just recently saw that. I'm for it. I just wonder what he's going to do with them.
Honest to God, make Uncle Howdy Bo Dallas. Have Uncle Howdy be Bo Dallas. Have Eric.
Some people think he is.
In my opinion, I think all of these things that are going on, the Uncle Howdy, this, that, it's all Bray Wyatt and all the 6 characters in his head. Because you've got the Eater of Worlds, you've got the Fiend, you've got Bray Wyatt, the Fall of the Buzzers, Uncle Howdy, you've got Bray himself. Those are 6. And it's interesting because, Uncle Howdy, if you think about it, you remember in The Exorcist and the character, how when they were doing the Ouija board with the Howdy, Colonel Howdy, I think it was.
Yeah, I think it's been a long time since I've seen it. It's been a long time since I've seen The Exorcist, but yeah.
Like Captain Howdy Colonel. So anyway, that's who she's talking to, and it's the devil. Obviously, it's the devil. So where are they going with this? I love the fact that a lot of the stuff that Bray does have these really deep meanings and allusions to things that were past, kind of the way that musicians will use hooks from old songs to make them relevant again. They kind of connect the dots in that semblance. I love that kind of stuff. So
are you saying that this is Bray Wyatt's Unforgiven 2? When Metallica redid Unforgiven? I think that would be pretty cool.
Now they have an Unforgiven 3.
I know. It's getting a little bit. It's not quite The Godfather, if we're being honest. But I am curious because I still don't know if Howdy is going to be an actual corporeal being, like a person, or if it's literally like you were saying, like if it's the devil inside Bray's head. Like we still don't really know, do we? We haven't seen him. I'm still of the thought process that it's probably more of his conscience talking to him, or the devil. The devil is in Bray, right?
Yeah. But that's what makes this whole thing fun with Bray Wyatt is because we really don't know what they're doing. We're just excited to have Bray Wyatt on television after 2 years away. I'm
excited to not be able to figure it out.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
It's something fresh. It's something that we're sitting here like, what are they going to do? What's the next move?
And that's when wrestling's good. Because wrestling oftentimes is so predictable, and that's when you're talking about getting stale, talking about going around full circle when we were first starting, like wrestling can become stale, and oftentimes it is stale. And I don't care, wrestling good, wrestling bad, this and that or whatever. I don't care as long as it allows me to step outside of my real life and escape from reality for an hour, 2 hours, like 3 hours, a little bit much, if we're being honest. But you know what I mean? Like as long as it allows me to suspend my disbelief for a little bit and keep me guessing, like I don't really care what it is. I don't care if it's paganism. I don't care if it's a wizards throwing fireballs from their hands. I don't care if it's a freaking giant clown that's suplexing people. As long as I can sit here and not think about the bad shit that's going on in my life for a little bit, I'm happy about it. But when it becomes predictable, it's harder to suspend that disbelief. And when you're left just questioning things, it's just fun, man. It's fun, and it makes me want to talk about it. It makes me excited about it. And the last thing I want to talk about is because I know we're wrapping up. We're coming up on an hour here. There are a couple really, really good matches. And I know you wanted to touch, we talked about it before the podcast. You wanted to touch on NWA Hard Times. So let's talk about that.
So NWA had their Hard Times, the third installment of this pay-per-view they've done. And things have been really odd with NWA right now. And Nick Aldis, who was their former champion, he got on the internet and said that he was like quitting the NWA and he wanted out. And there wasn't a lot of detail on it because he deleted it real quickly after that. Well, Billy Corgan suspended him.
So for anybody, to interrupt you, for anybody listening, this is not Dr. Dre and Eazy-E and Ice Cube. We're not talking about that. If you're not into the smaller parts of wrestling, I admittedly do not pay as close attention to the smaller franchises for wrestling than Rob does. So I'm letting him take a part of it. But yeah, the NWA is one of the oldest and arguably, greatest or has the best, we say, pedigree or legacy in wrestling. And now it's owned by Billy Corgan. From frickin' Smashing Pumpkins, right?
Yeah. So Billy Corgan from
I said Corbin. Billy Corbin.
We're not talking about Baron Corbin. Who cares?
We're not talking about the future god of pro wrestling.
Listen, JBL can't even save Baron Corbin. Let's be real about this. Take that guy back to his end of days gimmick, and maybe we'll see how it goes. But anyway, so Billy Corgan bought NWA about 5-6 years ago, and they've been doing the NWA Power Show online for a couple of years. They film it here in Atlanta at the old WCW Saturday night stage, and it works, and it's good, and it's fun because it's an alternative. And Nick Aldis, who was Magnus in Impact Wrestling and was Oblivion in the American Gladiator, the UK Gladiators version of American Gladiators about 10 years ago, 15 years ago. That's where he got his start. He's like 19 years old when he was on that show. And Nick Aldis is also the husband of Mickie James, Impact, former Impact Knockouts champion, WWE Women's Divas champion, etc. But Nick got online the other night. Trevor Murdoch was their champion up until last night. And people like Matt Cardona, the former Zack Ryder, has been doing things with NWA. And
so good, man.
There's a lot of
talking about a renaissance.
Yeah, we'll talk about him another night for sure. But anyway, Nick Aldis got on the internet one night and just got pissed and said, he's ready to leave NWA. He's sick of their bullshit and blah, blah, blah. He deleted it, but Billy saw it. Billy said, you know what? You're suspended. Don't even want you anywhere around. And so anyway, Hard Times was last night, and I actually had some notes on this. And I had a few production notes here. Give me one.
No, go ahead and look for them. I love that Billy Corgan and other people are, from other walks of life and superstars and things like that, love wrestling so much that he used his money and has admittedly lost so much money on NWA, but it's just so important to him, the legacy of it, that he wants to keep it alive. And to me, there's something so romantic about that,
There really is.
But there were, I think there was a title change, right?
There was a title change, yes. And Tyrus, the former Brodus Clay in WWE, he is the new NWA World's Heavyweight Champion, his first reign. He was the TV champ for a little while, gave up the title, and he went into this triple threat match with Matt Cardona and Trevor Murdoch. Trevor Murdoch, if you remember, he was in a tag team in WWE about 10, 15 years ago with a guy named Garrison Cade. And Trevor Murdoch is really important because he was one of Harley Race's last students. Wow. And he's a really, really good working man type wrestler. He's kind of a Harley Race. He's a throwback to Dusty Rhodes. He's a journeyman throwback kind of wrestler. And anyway,
and that's the whole theme for NWA too. NWA, power, it all feels much, it's very throwback. So something very nostalgic about it. And like I said, times get busy and I don't have enough time to watch them, but every single time I get a chance to see it, it definitely brings me back. There's definitely a nostalgia factor to it.
Yeah. So Yeah,
Did you find your notes?
Yeah, I'm just kind of thumbing through them real quick. But yeah, so this is Tyrus's first championship, NWA World Heavyweight Championship. He won the TV title. Apparently, it was just one of these things that they just decided that it was this guy's time, and with Nick Aldis kind of out of the picture, it was just a right moment. Tyrus actually has a show on Fox Nation. He has some kind of talk show on Fox Nation, or he's part of some show. I'm not entirely sure. I didn't really go in depth on my notes on that one, but it's really interesting to see how the evolution of the NWA is when you've got somebody like Nick Aldis who was a champion for them forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, and now it's like, what are they gonna do? What's the next move? Because this came out of nowhere. Like, what are they doing? And we don't know yet, because what's the next thing? What's the next big thing that's going to happen with this?
Do you think that NWA is doing better now? Because I know they are doing a little bit better now. Do you think Billy Corgan had something to do with that? Because he was with TNA. There's a whole debacle and lawsuits going back and forth, trying to save that, doing whatever. Mm-hmm. And I guess he sold his portion of TNA, and I guess he's fully doing NWA now. Do you know, is he doing the booking for this, or what capacity what role does he have in the day-to-days of NWA?
I'm not entirely sure. I do believe that he does some of the booking for them. Obviously, he is the mouthpiece for the company in a lot of ways, because it is his baby. I mean, he's in a lot of ways he's like Tony Khan, where he is an on-screen he's an on-screen character in the show, but I mean, it's him. It's not like he's a Mr. McMahon type of character. He's not like a Triple H kind of character.
Yeah. It's much more benign.
Being himself, very benign. But it's just going to be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, I remember seeing him on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he was talking about it, and I just love seeing how passionate that he got about it. And what's cool about that, too, is that somebody else that you wouldn't think that's very big in the music business was recently on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he was talking about wrestling, and that guy just happened to work with Billy Corgan, and not Smashing Pumpkins' last album, but the album before that they released, Oh Shiny, I believe. I can't remember the full name of it. It came out until like 2018. But that's Rick Rubin. Mm-hmm. One of the possibly one of the greatest music producers of all time. Yeah, he's worked with people from, he's the one that created the Run DMC Aerosmith crossover with Walk This Way. I mean, he's worked with Metallica. He's worked with so many hip hop artists. I mean, he arguably created the first real hip hop album. I mean, he's a huge guy, and I would have never thought. And I wonder if his relationship with Billy Corgan when they were working together had anything to do with why he's so adamant about it, because he says, self-admitted, he says that he watches 11 hours of wrestling a week. Rick Rubin does. That's more than us.
That's more than we do. That's more than we do combined.
Yeah. How does he do everything that he does and do that? He says he has to watch it before he goes to bed at night, because it relaxes him and it makes him feel good to go to bed. And I'm not going to try and paraphrase what he said on the podcast, but he, as he does with everything, he's a very good orator, but he's just the way his mind thinks is so unique, and he just very beautifully put why wrestling is important and why it's special to him. And it's basically saying, like, he thinks that wrestling is closer to the real world than people actually think or give credit to. And it's not supposed to be about, it's not supposed to be necessarily about a sporting event. And we talk about that all the time. It's wrestling isn't wrestling, right? It's all kinds of stuff, but it's not wrestling. Like, wrestling is a show about a wrestling show. And he kind of portrayed it as that. And Joe Rogan was just like, I would have never guessed that. He's like, I think it's ridiculous and this and that. And admittedly so, Joe Rogan is so rooted in UFC and combat sports that it would seem foreign to him, because most of the things that happen in wrestling, at least the wrestling that he's experienced, is so far removed from, MMA or, kickboxing or anything like that. But I just thought it was very beautiful. And I felt really, really good to hear from somebody like Rick Rubin, who I respect and love as an artist, also loves something that I loved. I thought it was probably worth mentioning since we're already talking about Billy Corgan and the NWA.
No,
Last thing I want to touch on Ron before we go is back over to AEW. There is a really, really good, maybe the match of the week, would you say, between Danielson and Sammy Guevara?
Whoa. Man, those two put on a freaking clinic. It's always fun. And you know, we give Sammy Guevara all kind of shit because he's a big mouth and a hothead and all this other stuff, and he creates a lot of controversy behind the scenes. But goddamn, that boy can go. Good Lord, he's good in the ring.
Yeah.
And having somebody like Bryan Danielson be his foil in a lot of ways, or vice versa, you know, it gives both of these guys an opportunity. Bryan, because he's older and he's still trying to go, and Sammy's young and he's trying to go, and these two just put on match after match after match of brilliance. It is so fun to watch both of these guys, even separately, put on matches. God damn, fun to watch those kids.
They're both good, and you know, you're talking about we give Sammy shit for the backstage stuff, and he does. But one thing I'll say about Sammy, and knock on wood, hopefully I don't eat my words with something in the future that happens, but any of the drama that he has seems fairly, and I'll use the word again, benign. Like, it seems to not really have a lot of long-term implications. It seems just kind of almost more like high school drama type stuff, as opposed to really serious stuff that is going to have like real world ramifications that affects that affects matches and stuff like that for the most part. Like you said, there's always going to be drama and things like that backstage. And I feel like Sammy is one of the ones that probably plays his cards a little bit closer to his chest as far as his gimmick goes. I think he probably tries to live his gimmick a little bit more than a large percentage of these people out here. And again, you know, coming back full circle, I think that probably has something to do with why you're hearing about him having drama and that attitude. I think he exudes that attitude outside of the ring that he portrays so well inside the ring.
And I can't, and I don't think I could agree with that more. I think too, going back to the whole high school drama thing, you know, I mean, that's just, I'm trying to plug my computer in, so I am listening to you. But, yeah. So, but like the high school drama thing, like, you know, too, I think that's just kind of a part of growing up too, because going once again, full circle with what we were talking about earlier, we look at a guy like Shawn Michaels 25 years ago, who was just a dick. I mean, a dick and hard to get along with. I mean, Bret Hart's Bret Hart, and he's always,
you didn't know it watching, but
yeah, I mean, you see this guy on TV and you're like, he's not like that for real, but no, he's like that for real. And so I think a lot of it too is going to be Sammy kind of growing into the business. I mean, you know, we talk about MJF and MJF not giving it. See, MJF's kind of a jerk, but he doesn't care. You know, I feel like Sammy's a jerk, but Sammy genuinely cares. I mean, I think you're gonna kind of see
Sammy. All the things that you hear about him, it's obviously I think it's more immaturity than anything else. He's so young, and like when he got in trouble with making those remarks about, when he got in trouble with making those remarks about Sasha Banks back in the day, and you know that was scary for a little bit. But like when you actually look, is what he said reprehensible? Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. How old was he when he said it? 18, 19 years old, maybe something like that. He was so young. Like it is locker room talk again. And if he would have said it in this day and age, I mean, he said it years ago, and cancel culture and you know, the Me Too movement wasn't quite as poignant as it is today. Not making any excuses, but what I'm saying is that I think most of it is immaturity. And I think as he matures as a wrestler, you're going to see him mature as a business person and just as a human in general. And I think Sammy really is going to be one of these, talents that maybe you don't see him maybe shoot quite like MJF has, but over the years, I think when we look back 10 years from now, we're going to still be talking about Sammy in this limelight, barring something horrible happen or whatever. I just think that he's on that trajectory. He's a great talent. Like, look, Jericho put him under his wing. He literally went on record saying that the entire reason why he created the Inner Circle was to push Sammy.
The
Inner Circle was Sammy's. He didn't know who the fuck Tito or Ortiz or Santana right? Yeah. He needed Jake because he needed a heater or whatever. But the inner circle was to push Sammy, and it's worked because look at what Sammy was before the inner circle.
Yeah, I know. And originally they were going to put Penta and Ray Phoenix in there instead of Ortiz and Santana, but they wanted guys without masks. They wanted to be able to see everybody's faces, so that's why they went with those two. Yeah. And with Sammy, God willing, Sammy, when you get old enough to know better, most people pivot. And hopefully, as Sammy grows and matures and gets out of that immaturity, he's going to pivot. And when he pivots, he's going to be one of the best. And I can't say enough good things about this guy's in-ring work. I hope that as a human being, he continues to develop. As a businessman, he continues to develop. But God damn it, in the meantime, I'm going to watch that kid, and I'm just going to be glued to the TV because I love watching him work.
He's got all the tools. He has all the tools. And as one tool talking to another, Rob, you are a gentleman and a scholar, as always, and I love you, and I appreciate you. Yes. I appreciate knowing you. I appreciate everything with this podcast. We're coming up on our 10th episode anniversary for the next one. I don't know what we're going to do. It's going to be big. Maybe we go to Vegas. I don't know. Yeah.
Hopefully,
but I just want to, you just did
on the street.
You just did the day that reminded me. I want to talk about that before we leave. All right. We're about to quit, but I have to.
I was trying to remind you. You were very close to the end of the show.
I want to buy. Danhausen has a pre-workout. What's it called, Rob?
Yes, very strong, very evil. Yes, very strong, very evil. And
I don't know who. It's from BPI Sports, which is a huge company. Yeah. And just think, good for him, man.
Talk about Danhausen more. I don't know why we don't talk about Danhausen. We talk about MJF all the goddamn time. But Danhausen, something very, very, very important, very evil. Danhausen likes to make millions and lots of bags of money. And so when he makes the bags of money with BPI and the very strong, very evil pre-workout, it's going to be big money. You're all going to see.
I'm not fully convinced that you're not Danhausen.
I don't know what you're talking about.
All I'm saying is I've never seen you and him in the same room.
Yes. Well, sometimes, I do things on my own, and sometimes you do things on your own, and we don't see much, but more than maybe 1 hour a week. So, who knows?
Yeah, you never know. Well, for my name is Justin, and for for Jason and Rob and Ryan, we would like to thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you check us out on Spotify, on Facebook, on Instagram. We're Better Than Broadway on all of them. Thank you guys so much. We love doing this. We hope you love watching it, or at least stay informed, or at least you're having fun making fun of how stupid we are and ridiculous. So we'll see you guys next time.
Very stupid, very intelligent.
Rob and Justin signing out.
Happy wrestling, everybody.